A billionaire CEO is startled when he enters his room on the cruise ship and finds a waitress sleeping deeply. From that moment on, everything starts to get more intense on this luxury cruise. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel and let's get started. Ethan Wood stirred at the faintest hint of daylight crossing the curtains of his lavish cruise ship suite. He was used to the hush that often accompanies early morning at sea, that unique stillness only the gentle rocking of the waves could create. Yet something felt different this time, like a subtle pulse in the room that wasn't his own. Fighting off the remnants of sleep, he listened more carefully. Beneath the distant hum of the ship's engines, there was the unmistakable sound of someone breathing, soft, measured, and definitely not his. Pushing aside the plush duvet, Ethan glanced around, his heart thudding with apprehension. He was certain he'd locked the door before collapsing into bed last night. On this particular voyage, he had every reason to be cautious. The entire trip revolved around the biggest deal of his career, a negotiation worth billions, with investors watching his every move. His gaze finally settled on a small figure slumped on the long sofa near the suite's window. A woman, still in her uniform, a black apron and crisp white shirt, fast asleep. She had braids that spilled over her shoulder, and her posture suggested deep exhaustion rather than any malicious intent. Next to her, a tray of cleaning supplies and a half-folded sheet lay strewn across the cushions. Her name tag caught the edge of a stray beam of light. Jasmine. Ethan's immediate instinct was to tap the button for security. But in the silence, he paused. She looked exhausted, cheeks pale, uniform wrinkled, as though she'd been trying to keep everything together for far too long. He slowly swung his feet out of bed, crossing the suite on plush carpet, curiosity building with each step. How had this woman ended up in a VIP cabin, let alone one belonging to a high-profile passenger? More importantly, how had she gotten past the locked door? He was about to clear his throat, half considering how best to question her, when her eyelids fluttered. She jolted upright, eyes wide in alarm, dropping a damp cloth onto the floor. Her reaction said it all. Pure mortification. I'm so sorry." Her words came out in a hushed, panicked burst. She scrambled to gather the cloths and cleaning supplies, as though by sheer frantic motion she could erase the fact she'd been found sleeping here. My shift ended so late, there was some confusion with the staff quarters and I'm sorry. I really am." Ethan raised a hand to halt her breathless apology. He realized she was trembling slightly, not from cold, but from the dread of whatever consequences might come from being discovered. Instead of anger, something close to empathy rolled through him. He gestured toward the window, indicating she should stand by the natural light if only to give her a calm moment. She peered at him warily, then rose, hugging the cleaning supplies to her chest as though they were a shield. "I didn't mean to break any rules," she whispered. "I had a double shift yesterday. I'm just so tired. It won't happen again." Ethan's mind flicked through potential responses, each one overshadowed by the gravity of her exhaustion. "You look like you're about to collapse," he said gently, stepping aside so she wouldn't feel cornered. "How long have you been working without a proper rest?" 2 days, maybe more." Her voice held an edge of desperation. "I'm covering extra hours. My kids, triplets, need so many things. I do what I have to." The mention of triplets made Ethan's eyes widen. He couldn't imagine the pressure of supporting 3 children on a waitress's salary. While he'd earned his fortune through relentless ambition and savvy business decisions, she was surviving through sheer grit and exhaustion. Something about that soft humility reminded him of people he'd met early in his career. Those who worked the hardest often received the least reward. Before he could say anything more, a firm knock rattled the suite door. Ethan's posture snapped upright. "Stay quiet," he told Jasmine, who looked ready to bolt. Then he beckoned her toward a heavy curtain by the balcony window. With barely a second thought, she slipped behind it, gripping the hem to keep out of sight. Another knock, more insistent this time. Ethan strode to the door and opened it a crack. His personal security detail stood there, 2 men in discreet suits, earpieces glinting. "Sir, is everything all right?" one asked, eyes scanning the room's perimeter. Ethan managed a calm expression. "I'm fine," he replied. "Did something happen?" They exchanged glances. "We tried reaching you on the suite phone, sir. When you didn't pick up, we came to check. Apologies if we're disturbing you." Ethan glanced over his shoulder, noticing the scattered tray near the sofa. He stepped out into the hallway to block their view. "I was in the shower," he lied smoothly. "Didn't hear anything." The guards hesitated, then nodded in unison. "Understood. If you need anything, let us know." They left with fleeting skepticism in their eyes, but no further questions. Breathing a sigh of relief, Ethan closed the door and motioned for Jasmine to emerge. The tension etched into her face told him this was only a temporary reprieve. "Thank you," she whispered, rushing toward the door before he could caution her further. But the moment she stepped into the corridor, she nearly collided with a tall man in a crisp uniform. A supervisor, judging by his stern expression and the name badge pinned prominently on his chest. He looked from Jasmine to Ethan, who appeared behind her and straightened in annoyance. "What's going on here?" The suspicion in his voice was as clear as the overhead fluorescent lights. Jasmine opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her gaze darted from the supervisor to Ethan, a silent plea flickering in her eyes. The supervisor pursed his lips, clearly piecing together what might have happened. Staff should not be in a VIP guest cabin unsupervised, especially not at this hour. Ethan stepped forward, carefully positioning himself between Jasmine and the supervisor's sharp glare. "She was cleaning. I requested an early morning service and she ended up staying later than planned." He aimed to project complete confidence, hoping the explanation would be enough to diffuse the situation. The supervisor didn't appear convinced. "Cleaning? With the door locked from the inside?" he asked skeptically. Ethan tucked his hands in his pockets, trying to remain composed. "We didn't want to be disturbed, obviously." He lowered his tone, lifting his chin, signaling that further questions might tread into territory of offending a billionaire client. "Is there a problem with that?" The supervisor's eyes narrowed, but Ethan's status carried weight. After a tense silence, the man cleared his throat. "Of course not, sir. I'll just note that this is quite unusual." Ethan said nothing further. Jasmine, cheeks burning, nodded mutely. Once the supervisor turned down the hallway, Ethan exhaled, stepping back into the suite and beckoning her to follow him just for a moment. She edged closer, relief and alarm dancing across her features. "I'm sorry," she breathed. "Really, Don't worry," he said softly, though his heart still pounded from the near miss. "Just be more careful. Go before he comes back." She bobbed her head, then paused. Even in her discomfort, a wave of gratitude lit her face. "Thank you," she said, voice trembling with relief. "I won't forget what you did." He offered a small nod, unsure what to say. She disappeared around the corner, disappearing from view. The corridor fell silent. Left alone, Ethan tried to gather his thoughts. He was here to finalize a critical business deal, one that demanded a pristine public image and composure. Yet here he was, taking a risk to protect a stranger, a young mother working double shifts just to make ends meet. The entire scenario felt strangely personal, stirring in him a desire to help in ways he hadn't expected. He locked the suite door behind him, determined to change and brace himself for the busy day ahead. But before he could even loosen his tie, his phone buzzed on the bedside table. The screen flashed with a message from his business partner, the same partner whose presence on this ship was crucial for sealing the deal. The text read, "We need to talk. Urgent. Any scandal will ruin everything." The timing felt too uncanny. The mere idea that word might get out about some staff member found asleep in his cabin, no matter how innocent the explanation, made Ethan's stomach twist. Already, doubts began to form in his mind. Should he have handled it differently? Was this all a terrible oversight or a precarious sign that something bigger was brewing? But another question took him by surprise, one far more personal than anything related to business. Why did he feel so strongly about defending Jasmine in the first place? He ran a hand through his hair and sank down into a chair, staring at the phone's glowing screen. That text was ominous. One misstep could jeopardize his billion-dollar agreement, not to mention the armies of employees and stakeholders depending on a successful negotiation. Yet, a lingering image appeared in his mind. Jasmine's weary expression, the quiet agony of a mother desperate to provide for her family. He couldn't just forget that. He'd gone out on a limb to protect her, and there was no turning back now. As Jasmine hurries away, Ethan receives a cryptic text from his partner insisting on an urgent meeting, hinting that any scandal could ruin the billion-dollar deal. Ethan wonders if Jasmine's accidental presence might already be a threat, and why he suddenly cares so much. Ethan stood by the glass-paneled railing on one of the cruise ship's upper decks, blinking against the early sun. He couldn't shake the lingering anxiety that had kept him awake most of the night. A fresh breeze carried the faint smell of salt and polished metal, but it did little to ease his tension. That final text from his partner, warning him about any potential scandal, still rattled around in his head. Below him, guests were wandering to breakfast, the clink of silverware and low chatter drifting through the open-air atrium. He spotted a few of the prominent investors he was meant to impress over the coming days. Their tailored suits and calm smiles suggested a confidence he wished he could share. What weighed on him, however, wasn't just the deal. His thoughts kept returning to Jasmine, the waitress he'd stumbled upon sleeping in his suite. He wondered if she was all right after the close call with the supervisor. His phone vibrated. Another message from his partner beckoned him to meet in one of the private lounges. Ethan tucked the device into his jacket pocket, heading toward the ship's executive deck. Despite the grandeur of the hallways with their polished railings and tastefully lit artworks, his mind remained elsewhere. He tried to walk casually, but every step felt loaded with a sense of foreboding. Inside the private lounge, his partner, tall, silver-haired, and impeccably dressed, stood by a window overlooking the ocean. For a moment, they merely regarded each other in silence. Then the partner turned, a polite smile forming that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Early morning walk, Ethan?" he asked, folding his arms. "You seem preoccupied." Ethan approached, drawn by the subtle threat he sensed in his partner's tone. "I've got a lot on my mind. This deal is massive. There's no room for error. That's precisely why I asked to speak with you." The partner nodded toward an empty chair, but Ethan remained standing. "I've been hearing some chatter among the investors. They're eager for a smooth negotiation, but they also worry about any distractions." Ethan's shoulders tensed. He wondered if rumors about Jasmine had already spread. "Distractions can come in many forms," he replied. "I assume you're talking about something specific." His partner gave a disarming chuckle. "Let's just say that a single rumor can derail even the best-laid plans. Think about it. A staff member found in your suite? Doesn't look great. People will make assumptions. One word in the wrong ear, and our entire deal faces scrutiny." "I told you it's nothing," Ethan said, though the firmness in his voice wavered. "She was there by accident." "Accidents have consequences," came the pointed reply. "We're too close to success to let a minor scandal blossom. Keep an eye on that, or better yet, steer clear." Ethan wanted to retort but felt cornered. He'd always prided himself on maintaining a solid reputation, an unblemished record that made investors trust him. But the memory of Jasmine's exhausted face wouldn't vanish from his mind. He couldn't simply pretend she didn't exist. "You worry too much," he said, trying to sound dismissive. "But thanks for the heads up." His partner gave a small, knowing smile. "Just protecting our interests." With that, he shifted to talk of schedules, upcoming investor dinners, and the importance of a well-choreographed approach to finalizing the contract. Ethan nodded in the right places, but his attention kept drifting to the possibility that his partner already had an agenda beyond friendly concern. When the meeting ended, Ethan left the private lounge feeling uneasy. He made his way toward the main dining area, intending to check in with the group of stakeholders who would gather for brunch. As he entered, the air felt charged. Smooth jazz played over hidden speakers, and staff, clad in crisp uniforms, darted to and fro carrying trays of exotic fruits and freshly baked pastries. His gaze landed on Jasmine almost immediately. She was behind a long buffet table, carefully arranging plates and pouring drinks. She looked different in the bright light, the worry on her face more pronounced. Though she tried to keep her movements quick and professional, he could see the tension in her posture. Her eyes flickered in his direction, and she hesitated, as if torn between gratitude and embarrassment. She must have overheard something. There was a tightness in the set of her jaw that told him rumors were spreading. To confirm his suspicions, he heard hushed giggles from a pair of waitresses behind her, followed by pointed looks. Jasmine's cheeks flushed, but she stayed focused on serving coffee to an elderly couple who seemed unaware of the undercurrent of gossip swirling around them. Ethan took a seat at a small table by the windows, swirling an untouched mug of tea in his hand. From that vantage point, he watched Jasmine navigate the room. Every so often, a co-worker paused to whisper behind her back, or a guest gave her a curious once-over after overhearing half the story. The tension was seeping into the rest of the staff as well, making people edgy. After finishing his tea, Ethan crossed to the buffet, excusing himself through a small crowd. Jasmine stood behind a tray of fruit tarts, her face carefully neutral. He picked up a dish of sliced melon, then leaned closer, voice low enough that only she could hear. "You okay?" Jasmine tilted her head in a subtle nod, though the worry in her eyes didn't abate. "It's just talk," she murmured. "Some of the staff think well, you know." "I do." His tone reflected more sympathy than he intended to show in such a public setting. "I'll do what I can to calm things down." Her expression softened in gratitude, but as she opened her mouth to respond, a stern voice from across the buffet interrupted. "Wood, over here." Ethan turned. His partner approached, hands in his suit pockets, eyes flicking briefly to Jasmine before locking onto Ethan. It was a silent but clear signal that their conversation should end, at least for now. Ethan gave Jasmine a tight smile and moved away. He joined his partner by a separate table where several influential investors were already seated. Their conversation covered every angle of the negotiation, from legal reviews to stock valuations. But a smirk on his partner's face hinted that he'd seen Ethan's brief exchange with Jasmine. Every so often, the partner dropped a vague comment about keeping focus or remaining professional, each barb lightly veiled but pointed. Meanwhile, across the dining hall, Jasmine forced herself to continue serving, wearing a polite smile for every guest. Yet beneath her uniform, her heart raced with the fear of losing her job or, worse, facing open humiliation. She couldn't afford to be dismissed. Her children relied on these paychecks, and she'd even counted on the extra tips from working in these prestigious sections of the ship. Each rumor that spread whittled away at her fragile sense of security. Eventually, the brunch tapered off. Investors filtered out, heading toward various leisure activities or early afternoon meetings. Staff began clearing away the plates. Jasmine, hands full of used coffee cups, briefly paused in the corridor to steal a moment of quiet. She exhaled, blinking back tears she refused to shed in public. A co-worker who'd befriended her, a kind-eyed woman with a gentle smile, sidled up to her. "Hey," the co-worker said softly, "heard the supervisor was grilling you again. You okay?" Jasmine shrugged, eyes darting around to ensure no one else heard. "I'm still on probation, apparently. One more slip, and they'll toss me overboard." Her friend made a sympathetic face. "You'd think they'd cut you a break, considering how hard you work." Jasmine looked down at the stack of cups, swirling with dregs of coffee. "Not everyone sees it that way," she murmured. "They say I just want money or attention from a wealthy guest." Her friend rolled her eyes. "Ridiculous. You're the hardest worker here. Don't let them wear you down." Jasmine mustered a small smile. After her friend left, she drew in a breath and hurried toward the kitchen, where she could drop off the dishes and hopefully find a few minutes of peace. Despite her efforts, every step she took felt like she was walking a tightrope. One false move, and the entire situation would explode. Back upstairs, Ethan entered his private suite. Striding to the tall windows, he surveyed the ocean's seemingly endless horizon, a momentary balm for his restless mind. Why did he care so deeply about Jasmine's predicament? In other circumstances, he might have politely overlooked it, focusing solely on his contract negotiations. But seeing her fear and resolve up close pricked his conscience. With the meeting behind him, he wanted answers. Specifically, who was fueling these rumors and why it felt like more than idle gossip. He tried calling his security team to see if they'd heard anything, but no one picked up. Throwing his phone onto the bed, he realized his partner's voice rang in his ears, cautioning him to stay clear of anything that might seem inappropriate. Still, he couldn't turn a blind eye, not when someone was actively working to pit the staff's reputation against him. He was so lost in thought that he almost missed the quiet buzzing of his phone. The name on the screen made him stiffen. His partner again. Ethan answered, bracing himself. "Where are you?" the voice demanded, skipping any form of greeting. "In my suite." "Good," came the clipped response. "I need to see you. Alone. Let's meet on the forward deck in an hour." Ethan frowned at the abrupt tone. "Is this about the contract?" There was a pause, punctuated by the faint crackle of the line. "Among other things," his partner said, "we have a situation, and it needs to be handled now." Before Ethan could protest or ask more, the call ended. He stared at his phone, a sense of dread creeping up his spine. Whatever strategy his partner had in mind, it would almost certainly involve forcing Ethan to distance himself from Jasmine. And if he didn't, the consequences could be enormous. The stakes had never felt higher, both for the deal and for the quiet young woman who'd just been trying to get some rest. Ethan's phone buzzes with a new message from his partner. "We need to talk, alone," implying that Jasmine is now a dangerous complication he won't tolerate. Ethan stepped onto the forward deck, the wind tugging at his collar and carrying with it the soft crash of waves against the ship's hull. Despite the open sky and endless expanse of glittering blue water, the atmosphere felt stifling. He'd come here at his partner's summons once again to hear another lecture on why protecting Jasmine was a threat to their entire business deal. His partner was already waiting, leaning against the railing with a posture that suggested he believed he owned the ship. A slight tilt of the head, a faintly scornful glance at Ethan's approach. It was the same silent condescension Ethan had seen many times in boardrooms. Usually that disdain was directed at market competitors or incompetent legal teams. But now, Ethan felt the brunt of it himself. "You're late," the partner said, barely moving his lips. "I came as soon as I could," Ethan replied. The words came out tight, reflecting his pent-up frustration. "You said there was something urgent." The partner's gaze flicked past Ethan as if searching for anyone who might be eavesdropping. But the deck was nearly empty, most guests still busy with breakfast or exploring the ship's amenities. Only a light breeze ruffled the potted ferns behind them. Satisfied, the partner turned his attention back to Ethan. "I've been speaking with a few investors," he said. "They're uneasy. Rumors are swirling about you and that waitress. Some are even questioning whether you're losing your focus." Ethan's pulse quickened, though he kept his face impassive. "And you believe them?" The partner shrugged. "Doesn't matter what I believe. Perception is everything. If the board thinks you're compromised, emotionally or otherwise, they'll pull out of this deal faster than you can blink." Ethan bristled. He wanted to argue that the board should trust his track record, that one rumor about a staff member wouldn't derail a billion-dollar negotiation. But the partner's pointed stare told him he'd find no sympathy here. "I have it under control," he said. "We just need to finalize the numbers and present them cleanly. That's it." His partner exhaled, his expression settling into something akin to pity. "The minute a scandal touches you, it taints everything we've built. This isn't just about your reputation, Ethan. It's about the entire enterprise." The words stabbed at his pride. "So, what exactly are you suggesting I do? Fire her? Have her thrown off the ship?" The partner didn't blink. "If it comes to that, maybe she needs to find employment elsewhere. We need a sterile environment, free of distractions. You said it yourself. You'll do anything to protect the deal." Ethan's jaw set in a hard line. "I meant I'd do whatever it takes to make this negotiation succeed, but not by trampling on someone's life." "Isn't that what you pay lawyers for?" his partner said, a half-smile creeping into place. "You wouldn't be doing the dirty work yourself. You'd be safeguarding the future of your company." Ethan's stomach churned with anger. "That's not how I operate. Don't forget, I built this business from the ground up by respecting people, not discarding them like pawns." A flicker of annoyance crossed his partner's face. "Then keep an eye on her. If the rumors continue, we need to act decisively." With that, he pushed away from the railing and brushed past Ethan, leaving him standing alone on the deck, staring after the man who was supposed to be his ally. Ethan lingered there, absorbing the morning sun that now felt too harsh on his skin. He wanted to escape the weight of the conversation, but even as he left the deck, the tension followed him like a dark cloud. He decided to seek out Jasmine. Perhaps he could assess how bad the gossip was getting and figure out a way to help her, and by extension, keep their business deal from imploding. He found her on a mid-level deck, circulating among small cafes and shops, carrying a tray of pastries to restock a display. She paused near a lounge entrance, checking the time on her phone. The fatigue was still evident in her eyes, but when she saw Ethan approaching, she quickly tried to compose herself. He offered her a small smile. "Can we talk for a minute?" She hesitated, glancing around to make sure no one was watching too closely. "I'm due in the main dining hall soon, but—" "Yes, of course." They stepped aside into a quiet alcove near a decorative fountain. The mild trickle of water provided a semblance of privacy. Ethan spoke softly. "How are you holding up? Are they giving you trouble?" Jasmine's shoulders slumped, though she kept her voice steady. "The supervisor watched me like a hawk all morning. He didn't say much, but his stare was enough. Some of the other staff—" Her eyes tightened with hurt. "They think I'm playing you, I guess." A surge of protectiveness rose in Ethan's chest. "I know none of this is your fault." She nodded, relieved but still wary. "Thank you. I'm just trying to keep my head down. The last thing I want is to cause issues, especially for you." Her sincerity struck him once more, that quiet determination overshadowed by constant stress. He wished he could fix it all right then and there. But the stakes were growing, and the opposition was more cunning than he'd hoped. "I'll handle it," he said gently. "Just be careful." The sound of footfalls broke their brief moment of calm. Jasmine murmured a quick goodbye and dashed away, returning to her duties. Ethan watched her go, renewed resolve beating in his chest. He headed toward one of the business lounges where he hoped to find his security detail or a loyal advisor who could help him figure out who was fueling these rumors. On the way, he could practically feel stares from passing staff. Some parted their gaze politely, but others openly observed him with curiosity or disapproval. The gossip was indeed spreading like wildfire. Not long after, as he was making his way through a narrow corridor that linked the dining hall to the central staircase, a sharp voice behind him called, "Ethan Wood?" He turned to see a man wearing the ship's uniform, though it was slightly off compared to the standard. The stranger had a haughty twist to his mouth, his arms crossed. Something about the man's stance made Ethan uneasy. He answered cautiously, "Can I help you?" "Word is you've taken a liking to one of our waitresses," the man said. "I just wanted to let you know. Some of us are concerned about how that might affect the ship's reputation." Ethan recognized the blatant goading. He responded flatly, "I handle my affairs responsibly. If you have a real complaint, take it up with management." The man smirked. "Oh, I wouldn't dream of it. But you know how things go. If a staff member crosses lines, they might need to be put in their place." Rage flickered, but Ethan kept his composure. "Are you threatening her?" The man shrugged, lips curling. "A warning, more like. The captain values calm and order. If something disrupts that, we've been asked to keep it from escalating." Ethan narrowed his eyes. "Tell whoever sent you that I don't respond well to threats." Without waiting for a reply, he turned and left, anger simmering in his chest. The conversation confirmed that not only were rumors flying, but someone was actively trying to scare Jasmine off the ship, and that meant they were playing dirty. As the evening shadows grew longer, Ethan roamed the decks with a heightened sense of vigilance. He wanted to make sure Jasmine was safe. He found her eventually near a stairwell, sorting napkins on a service cart. Her friend, the kind-eyed co-worker, stood alongside her, whispering something that made Jasmine's face register sudden alarm. Sensing trouble, Ethan moved closer, overhearing a snippet of what the co-worker was saying. "He's been asking about you all day. Said he might teach you a lesson." When Jasmine looked up, she saw Ethan and exhaled a breath of relief. Someone's been hanging around saying I should keep my mouth shut. I think it's connected to your negotiations." Ethan pressed his lips together. He couldn't dismiss it now, not when it was blatant harassment. "You'll stay with me," he said calmly. "I'll walk you back to your cabin." They gathered the cart and hurried along the corridor. Dim lighting and the hum of the ship's engine lent an ominous quality to the space. Halfway down, a figure stepped out from behind a door, blocking their path. It was the same uniformed man who had spoken to Ethan earlier. "Going somewhere, miss?" he sneered, focusing on Jasmine. Ethan positioned himself between them. "Get out of our way." The man's smile vanished, replaced with a look of predatory determination. "You don't scare me," he snapped. "Do you think you can protect her from everything?" He reached for Jasmine's wrist with alarming speed. Ethan reacted instantly, grabbing the man's arm and yanking it aside. The trays of napkins spilled onto the floor as Jasmine jumped back. Adrenaline coursed through Ethan's veins as he shoved the aggressor against the corridor wall. The man struggled, cursing and trying to swing a fist, but Ethan caught it and held him firm. "What is your problem?" Ethan hissed, struggling to contain his fury. The stranger's eyes flicked with a mix of fear and rage. Clearly, he hadn't expected such force. Footsteps echoed from the far end of the corridor as other staff and possibly security rushed toward the commotion. The altercation was over almost as quickly as it had begun. Startled voices filled the air, some gasping when they recognized Ethan, one of the most important guests aboard. The aggressor, now pinned, stammered a half-hearted excuse, but it was drowned by the onlookers' shock. Jasmine stood off to the side, her hands trembling against the service cart. She couldn't tear her eyes away from the scene. In that moment, the depth of Ethan's protectiveness struck her, and tears of relief mingled with terror. The scuffle drew the attention of uniformed security personnel, who arrived and demanded an explanation. Ethan, chest heaving, relinquished his hold. The man glared but said nothing, apparently realizing he'd crossed a line that could cost him dearly. "What's going on here?" asked a voice behind the security guards. It was the cruise director, a tall, impeccably dressed woman whose eyes were cold with impatience. Ethan straightened, smoothing his jacket. "This man attacked Ms. Jasmine. I was defending her." The director's gaze swept from Ethan to the trembling figure on the floor. There was no mistaking the seriousness in her voice when she said, "You two, my office now." Within the hour, Ethan found himself sitting in the cruise director's sleek, modern office, the hum of the ship's machinery faint through the walls. Jasmine sat beside him, still visibly shaken. Across the desk, the director pressed her fingers together, the expression on her face less anger than disappointment. "Mr. Wood, We greatly value your presence on this ship, but such disruptions cannot continue." She turned to Jasmine, adding with a softer tone, "And if staff are instigating violence against each other or a guest, we need to address it immediately." Ethan spoke first. "That man was harassing her. He was threatening her job, and worse, I acted to protect her." The director glanced at Jasmine, who nodded, tears glimmering at the corners of her eyes. "It's true. He cornered me in a hallway. This wasn't the first time he's made threatening comments." The director's expression darkened. "We do not tolerate intimidation or violence. I'll see that he's dealt with. However," and here she fixed Ethan with a pointed look, "we also don't want further confrontations. This ship isn't a battleground for corporate grudges or personal entanglements." Ethan bit back a retort. He couldn't blame the director for wanting peace, but there was far more to the situation than she realized. Something told him that even if they removed this one aggressor, others might step in to fan the flames. In the end, the meeting ended with a sharp admonition from the cruise director. She demanded that Ethan keep a low profile and that Jasmine report any future intimidation immediately, rather than relying on physical altercations. That was as close to a solution as they were going to get. When the door finally swung open and the pair stepped into the corridor, relief mingled with new worry. Ethan's face was drawn, tension radiating off him as he turned to Jasmine. He reached out and gently touched her elbow. She blinked up at him. "Thank you for defending me," she whispered. He studied her features, noticing again how vulnerable yet resolute she seemed. "There's no need to thank me. It was the right thing to do." His gaze flicked down the empty hallway as though expecting another ambush. "But we both know this is bigger than one fight." They walked in silence for a few steps, the corridor lighting reflecting in small flashes on the polished floor. The hush around them felt eerie, as if the ship itself were holding its breath. Ahead, the main deck doors stood open, revealing warm evening light beyond. The hush broke suddenly with the sound of approaching footsteps. The cruise director emerged from her office, passing them with a cool nod. Ethan caught her eye, aware that she was giving them one last reminder. No more trouble. Once they were a safe distance away, he gently guided Jasmine aside, near a tall, decorative planter where no one else seemed to be listening. The aftermath of the confrontation weighed on them both. He could read the question in her eyes, whether staying on this ship was worth the risk. He had no easy answers. In a low voice, he said, "I know you're scared, but I'm not about to let them push you around. If anyone else tries to intimidate you, come find me immediately." She swallowed hard, nodding. "Thank you. Really. I don't know what I'd do if—" Before she could finish, he caught the faint flicker of anxiety across her features, the same anxiety he'd seen the first time she woke in his suite, terrified of losing her job. He felt a surge of protectiveness, mixed with a realization that his partner and other powers behind the scenes would stop at nothing to ensure the deal went smoothly, even if that meant sacrificing her. They stood there a moment longer, the steady hum of the ship vibrating beneath their feet. Then they turned together toward the exit, where the sunset painted the deck in shades of gold and crimson. As they made their way outside, a sense of unity pulsed between them, unspoken but undeniable. Ethan paused just before they parted, noticing the cruise director down the corridor. He knew he had to reassure Jasmine somehow, despite his own doubts. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, his voice quiet and firm. "We're in this together now," he said, his jaw set. "But I have to warn you, this is only going to get harder." Ethan stood at the edge of the main deck, eyes fixed on the endless blue horizon. The morning breeze carried a crisp scent of salt, but the calm sea did nothing to soothe his nerves. He'd barely slept, replaying last night's scuffle in his head. That confrontation in the corridor had been a wake-up call. Threats against Jasmine were growing bolder, and the timing couldn't be worse. The Grand Gala, a massive event tied to the impending contract, was now just 24 hours away. Any hint of scandal could derail everything he'd worked for. He spotted Jasmine stepping onto the deck from the opposite side, her uniform neatly pressed despite the exhaustion in her face. She caught his eye and approached, mindful of the curious looks from a few passing guests. They moved closer to the railing, where the low hum of chatter wouldn't carry as far. "We need to stay vigilant," Ethan said quietly, taking in the faint shadows under her eyes. "That man who attacked you might just be the tip of the iceberg. Someone's stirring the pot, and I suspect my partner has a hand in it." Jasmine nodded, folding her arms. "Rumors are getting worse," she murmured. "I served some VIPs at breakfast, and I heard them whispering about me. They think I'm trying to latch onto you for money." Her cheeks flamed with a mixture of humiliation and anger. "That's exactly the kind of talk my partner wants," Ethan said, glancing around to ensure they weren't overheard. "If enough investors believe you're some sort of gold digger, they'll question my judgment. And if my judgment is in doubt, this entire deal could fall apart." Jasmine shifted uncomfortably. "I never asked for any of this attention. I just wanted to do my job in peace." He offered a reassuring nod. "I know, and it's not your fault. But we can't let these rumors fester. I have to protect you, and the deal, at the same time." They both looked out over the sea, sharing a moment of uneasy silence. Down on the promenade deck, a cluster of investors walked by in immaculate summer suits, their faces set in polite smiles. Ethan recognized them, had seen their signatures on countless documents, but now he feared they might be swayed by the slightest whiff of controversy. He exhaled slowly. "Let's get through today without any drama. Tomorrow night is the gala, and I can't afford more bad press. Try to keep your distance from me in public just for the next day or so." A flicker of hurt crossed her features, but she swallowed it down. If that's what it takes. He wanted to say more, maybe apologize for the distance he had to impose. But a group of staff passed by, so he simply gave her a small, comforting smile and stepped back. By midday, preparations for the gala were in full swing. The ship's main ballroom began transforming with shimmering drapes, floral arrangements, and ornate lighting rigs. Ethan decided to make an appearance, hoping to gauge the mood among the decorators and staff, while also checking for any signs of further sabotage. One of the top-tier event planners greeted him with a flurry of details. Ethan nodded politely, scanning the space for hidden tensions. Guests strolled through, curious about the decor. In a corner, he noticed one of his loyal advisors, a longtime confidant who had accompanied him on many business ventures, watching everything with hawk-like intensity. "Over here," his advisor beckoned when Ethan approached. "Something feels off. I've been hearing from my contacts that your partner is quietly feeding the investors stories, suggesting you're more interested in some affair with a staff member than the deal itself." Ethan's jaw tensed. "So the sabotage is coming directly from him." The advisor gave a grim nod. "He wants the contract to hinge on you behaving impeccably. If you don't, or if you seem compromised, he might maneuver to take a bigger slice for himself. It's like he's setting you up to fail, unless you play into his narrative. So he's making me look reckless. Then he'll swoop in as the voice of reason," Ethan muttered, bitterness creeping into his tone. "I need proof he's behind this, or at least something to discredit his rumors." The advisor leaned in, lowering his voice. "We might already have a lead. Some staff have noticed an unfamiliar face lurking around the offices. Could be a mole working for your partner. If we find them and any documents or communications they've used, we can expose him." Ethan's eyes flitted around the busy ballroom. "Let me know as soon as you have something concrete." Meanwhile, Jasmine found herself caught in an undercurrent of whispers throughout the day. Whenever she walked into a room, conversation seemed to hush. Some co-workers barely hid their scorn, while others offered sympathetic smiles but kept their distance, wary of tangling themselves in the blossoming scandal. In the staff break room, she collapsed onto a bench, rubbing her eyes. Her friendly co-worker sat down next to her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "I know it's awful," the co-worker said softly, "but don't give up. Most of us know you're not a gold digger. You've been working like crazy since day one." "Some days, I just want to hide," Jasmine admitted, voice trembling. "And the gala tomorrow, I'm worried it'll be another chance for them to humiliate me. People are already talking about how any scandal that night could ruin Ethan's deal." Her co-worker offered a kind, knowing look. "Ethan might be in trouble, sure, but you've got your own problems. Hang in there. You're not alone." Jasmine swallowed hard. She nodded and thanked her friend, though her nerves remained frayed. Late in the afternoon, as she set up napkins and glassware in a smaller lounge, she found a folded note slid under a plate. "Leave the ship before the gala if you know what's good for you." She stared at the words, hands shaking, and fought the urge to tear it to pieces. Instead, she quickly pocketed it, refusing to give any onlookers the satisfaction of seeing her break down. She went searching for Ethan, determined to inform him that someone was making direct threats again. But he was sequestered with investors, trying to calm their nerves about the swirling rumors. She decided to wait, not wanting to risk causing a scene by marching into a meeting full of VIPs. By dinner, Ethan managed to slip away and find Jasmine in the corridor outside the main dining hall. She quietly showed him the menacing note. His face tightened with anger. "Whoever wrote this wants you gone before the gala," he muttered, scanning the hallway for eavesdroppers. "That means they think you'll stand in the way of their plan." A question hung in the air. Would Jasmine be safe if she stayed on board? But she refused to budge. "I can't leave. I need this job and the tips from the gala. I can't abandon everything just because someone wants to scare me off." A surge of admiration mixed with worry rose in Ethan. He respected her resolve but felt torn between wanting her safely off the ship and needing to protect her here. "All right," he said at last. "Then you won't go anywhere alone. If someone's following you, we'll know." Night settled over the ocean, the ship's many decks alive with music and the chatter of guests enjoying the final hours before the big event. Yet beneath the bright lights and elegant decor, tension crackled like static. In the distance, the main ballroom stood nearly complete, a vision of glimmering fabrics, chandeliers, and carefully arranged centerpieces. Ethan returned to his suite late, exhaustion pressing on him. The day had been a blur of investor meetings, discreet conversations with his advisor, and covert glances toward Jasmine every time he passed her. Each interaction reminded him how precarious their situation had become. One slip, and they'd be in the center of a full-blown scandal. He flicked on a lamp by the bed, intending to review the day's notes, when a sudden knock startled him. His heart jumped at the unexpected sound at this hour. After pausing, he crossed the room and opened the door a crack. Standing there was his advisor, eyes wide and face pale. "Ethan," the advisor whispered, clearly on edge. "They're about to release something big on Jasmine. You need to act fast." Ethan's advisor stood in the doorway, breathless and uneasy. The words he had just spoken still rang in Ethan's ears. They're about to release something big on Jasmine, and time was running out. The faint hum of the ship's machinery underfoot made the silence between them even heavier. Ethan gestured for the advisor to come in. The suite's overhead lights illuminated stacks of paperwork scattered across the table, an unfinished plate of fruit, and the lingering tension in the air. With a trembling hand, the advisor shut the door behind him. "What do you mean, something big?" Ethan asked, tone hushed yet urgent. "I already know there's a campaign of rumors, threats. Are you telling me it's worse than we thought?" The advisor exhaled, gathering his thoughts. "I heard whisperings from some staff who've been encouraged to talk about Jasmine, but now there's more concrete action. Somebody is planting documents, sensitive information from your own company, and forging them to look like she stole it." Ethan felt a jolt of anger so sharp it felt physical. "They're framing her for corporate espionage?" The advisor nodded grimly. "Yes. A few stray emails were seen, apparently with her name attached. It's likely meant to paint her as a spy who got close to you on purpose, to siphon intel and then sell it. Enough to scare off any investor who values confidentiality." Ethan's frustration erupted. "This can't be happening. It's too convenient. Someone's trying to slam us both, and with the gala less than a day away, this is perfect timing for them to undermine me." The advisor's eyes darted around the suite, as if searching for hidden cameras or listening devices. "Whoever they are, they're hoping to spark a scandal so explosive that your entire negotiation goes up in flames. If the rumors stick, you'll look incompetent or complicit. Either way, it kills the deal." Ethan raked a hand through his hair. "Does Jasmine know?" "Not yet. I came straight to you." The advisor swallowed hard, wincing at the obvious question in Ethan's gaze. "I think you should warn her right away. She needs to prepare. There could be accusations any minute now." Ethan nodded, already moving toward the door. "Then we'd better find her before this spreads any further." They rushed through the quiet corridors of the ship, passing a few guests dressed in evening wear, couples strolling hand in hand. Soft music filtered in from the lounge. Every so often they'd catch a curious glance from staff who recognized Ethan, but no one approached. It was like a storm was brewing, and everyone wanted to steer clear of the first rumblings. Soon they reached the staff wing. The hallway lights were dimmer here, the floors scuffed by years of service carts. They found Jasmine in a small side room, sorting through extra linens and napkins. She looked up in alarm as Ethan and his advisor entered, her expression wary. "Ethan?" Her voice carried relief mingled with anxiety. "It's late. What happened?" He took a moment to catch his breath. "I need to tell you something, and it isn't good. There's a plan in motion to frame you. They've forged documents from my company and slapped your name all over them, making it look like you stole confidential data." Jasmine's face paled. "That's impossible. I don't even have access to—" "I know," Ethan said firmly, cutting through her rush of words. "But they want to make it look convincing. If they push this rumor and those documents to the right people, it could ruin your life. They want to see you fired or arrested, maybe both." Her hands clenched around a folded napkin, knuckles whitening. "Why go that far?" Ethan's advisor spoke up. "Because it hurts Ethan too. You'd be seen as a spy, and he'd be seen as a fool, or worse, an accomplice. The timing is no accident. The gala tomorrow night is crucial for investor confidence." Jasmine's eyes flicked from the advisor to Ethan. "So what do we do?" Ethan exhaled slowly. "I need to calm the investors before they catch wind of this. But to do that, I need proof the documents are fake and that you never had access to them. My advisor and I will search for whatever leads we can find. In the meantime, you have to protect yourself. Keep your phone on you. Don't go anywhere alone." She pressed her lips together, a mixture of fear and determination shining in her gaze. "All right, I'll be careful." They left her to finish her duties with a promise to update her if they learned anything new. As Ethan and his advisor retraced their steps back toward the upper decks, tension hung between them like static. The corridor felt colder, the overhead lights harsher. "I'll ask the IT staff on board if they've seen any suspicious logins or file transfers," the advisor said. "There might be an electronic trail." "Do it," Ethan replied, glancing at his watch. "We don't have much time. The gala is tomorrow night, and these people won't wait until the last minute. They'll want to seed those rumors early enough that they explode in public." His advisor peeled away down a separate hallway, while Ethan headed toward the lounge to see if any of the investors were still mingling. The next step, he knew, was damage control. If any news of corporate espionage reached the big players, he had to get ahead of it. The entire deal hinged on stability and trust, two qualities slipping through his grasp with every passing hour. The lounge was nearly empty when he arrived. A few tired businessmen nursed cocktails, engaging in hushed conversation. Soft piano music drifted from a corner. Ethan spotted one of the major stakeholders, a silver-haired man known for being risk-averse. "Perfect," Ethan thought. "I can start with him." He approached, exchanging polite greetings. After a moment of small talk, Ethan carefully probed, "Have you heard any troubling rumors about my firm? Or about a staff member here?" The stakeholder arched an eyebrow. "Only the usual gossip on a cruise. Why, should I be concerned? Ethan forced a relaxed smile. No cause for alarm, just ensuring everything remains smooth. He couldn't risk tipping his hand if the rumor hadn't reached them yet. Still, he left the conversation unsettled. The investor seemed suspicious of his question. An hour later, Ethan sat alone in a secluded corner of the lounge, swirling a glass of water he'd barely touched. His phone buzzed. The caller ID displayed his advisor's name. "Did you find anything?" Ethan asked the moment he picked up. "Not much," the advisor admitted, sounding frustrated. "The IT guys confirmed someone accessed your corporate server last night, but they can't say who. The logs were wiped. Whoever did this covered their tracks." Ethan pinched the bridge of his nose. "So they definitely have something. We just don't know where or who it's coming from." "Exactly. If they show it to the investors before we can disprove it, the fallout will be huge. We need a more direct approach. Maybe corner your partner with some pointed questions. He's definitely behind this." Ethan's jaw tightened. "I'll talk to him soon. Keep digging." He ended the call, making a plan to confront his partner at the earliest opportunity. A wave of exhaustion hit him, the enormity of the situation bearing down. This went beyond a petty rumor or two. The sabotage was sophisticated. Someone had inside access to manipulate files and create a false trail leading directly to Jasmine. Sometime past midnight, Ethan finally made his way back to his suite, steps heavy. Instead of going straight to bed, he sank into an armchair, mind racing. The lamp on the desk cast a warm glow over the scattered papers detailing his negotiation strategy. Everything felt fragile now. A single accusation could rip it all to shreds. Thoughts drifted to Jasmine. Was she safe in her cramped crew quarters, or was someone lurking in the hallway waiting to intimidate her again? He remembered the desperation in her eyes when he'd told her about the forged documents. She had to be terrified, yet she stood firm. He admired her resolve, even as it broke his heart that she had to face such cruelty. Eventually, exhaustion overtook him, and he dozed off in the chair. Hours later, he awoke to the faintest light of dawn creeping through the curtains. His muscles ached from sleeping upright, but the jolt of adrenaline coursing through him shook off any lingering drowsiness. He noticed a flash drive sitting on the desk, a gift from the advisor, presumably. Scrawled on a sticky note was a reminder, evidence they found in the system logs. He wasted no time, plugging it into his laptop. His heart pounded with each passing second as he opened folder after folder of scanned documents, partial log files, anything that might give him an edge. The text on the screen confirmed his worst fears. Timestamps showed repeated logins at odd hours, with documents suspiciously matching those rumored to have Jasmine's name inserted. Worse, there were messages referencing a staff infiltration, making it look like she'd used her position to gather data. A wave of anger coursed through him as he realized the depth of the conspiracy. "This is huge," he muttered, eyes narrowing at the sheer volume of tampered files. "And it's going to blow up at the gala tonight." Morning broke over the horizon in a haze of pale gold, but Ethan barely noticed the beauty outside his suite's windows. The only thing on his mind was the explosive new evidence he'd uncovered on the flash drive. Sleepless hours had come and gone, and now the sun creeping across the sky reminded him that the grand gala was nearly upon them. He had less than a day to stop the damage before it spun completely out of control. A sharp knock on the door startled him from his thoughts. It was his advisor, eyes reflecting the same tension Ethan felt. Without waiting for an invitation, the advisor stepped in and quietly shut the door. "I spoke to the onboard IT staff again," the advisor said in a low voice. "They confirmed someone accessed those files using a generic login. It's almost untraceable. Whoever did it knew exactly how to hide their tracks." Ethan exhaled slowly. "So the sabotage is deeper than I realized. And you're sure the forged documents are set to be revealed at tonight's event?" His advisor nodded. "They're timing this to have the maximum impact. The big investors will be there, the press as well. A scandal then would be catastrophic." Ethan straightened, smoothing the front of his shirt as though preparing for battle. "We have to get ahead of this. I'm not going to let them destroy Jasmine's life or tank the deal because of some cheap trick." His advisor gave a grim smile. "I'll do what I can, but you should warn Jasmine about what could happen. She needs to know things might come to a head tonight." Ethan grabbed his phone and headed for the corridor. Outside, the hum of the ship's machinery blended with excited chatter from guests who had only one thing on their minds: the gala. Staff bustled by, carrying fresh flowers, linens, and meticulously packed crates of champagne. A brass quartet was rehearsing in a lounge somewhere, their notes drifting through the hall. He found Jasmine near the laundry room, sorting crisp tablecloths that had just come from the press. Even in the midst of her task, she wore a look of quiet determination. When she glanced up and noticed him, worry flickered across her features. Quickly, she folded the cloth in her hands and stepped aside with him. "You look exhausted," she said softly. "Did something else happen?" Ethan didn't try to hide the gravity in his tone. "We think they're going to make their move at the gala. They'll try to prove you stole my company's information. It's all fake, but it'll look real enough to cause a scandal." Jasmine's grip tightened on the linen she held. "I've never even touched your files, let alone tried to steal anything. How can they make people believe it?" "Perception is powerful," he muttered. "People on the outside only see what's placed right in front of them. If they hand out those forged documents while cameras are flashing, it's going to look damning. Then word spreads, rumors multiply. By the time we deny it, half the guests won't believe a word we say." Her voice quivered. "So what do we do?" "I'm meeting with a few key investors quietly this afternoon to calm them down preemptively. After that, we show up at the gala and stay prepared for whatever happens." A sense of protectiveness rushed through him. "But you have to be careful. They might try to corner you or throw accusations when you're alone." A flicker of fear crossed her face, but she steadied herself. "I'll be cautious. It's just, if they succeed, I could lose everything. I can't afford a lawsuit or jail time." "You won't face this alone," Ethan promised. "I won't let them bury you under lies, not if I have any say in it." They shared a moment of tense silence. Then a passing supervisor called for Jasmine to load the tablecloths onto a cart. She gave Ethan a determined nod and returned to her duties, though he noticed her stiff shoulders and the subtle tremor in her hands. It broke his heart that she had to keep working like nothing was wrong while enemies lurked on all sides. He left her to it, hurrying to a private meeting room where several major investors were waiting. Their eyes flickered with suspicion as he entered, but he forced a polite smile, inviting them to sit around a small conference table. A pitcher of water and some pastries sat untouched in the center. Without giving them time to dominate the conversation, Ethan launched into an explanation of the business deal, reminding them of the potential profits and the robust stability of his company. Carefully, he steered the talk toward rumors, addressing them before anyone else had the chance to bring it up. "I understand some of you may have heard whispers about impropriety," he said, maintaining an even tone. "I want to assure you that there is no truth to the claims floating around. My staff member Jasmine is being framed. We have evidence to prove it." A tall investor with gray sideburns narrowed his eyes. "You can prove it?" Ethan nodded firmly. "That's exactly what I'm working on. By this evening I hope to have more clarity. In the meantime, I ask that you weigh my track record of transparency against any malicious rumor." They seemed only partially convinced, but their murmurs softened from alarm to a guarded caution. Ethan knew it wasn't a victory, but at least the seeds of doubt about the accusations were planted. He hoped it would buy him and Jasmine time. In the late afternoon, the final decorations for the gala were put in place. Towering floral displays, gleaming chandeliers, and ornate table settings that sparkled under brilliant lights. Staff moved with choreographed precision, every detail checked and rechecked. The ship's central foyer now felt like a stage waiting for its drama to unfold. Ethan wandered through the area, scanning for anything out of place. He spotted his partner standing near the entrance, engaged in hushed conversation with someone he didn't recognize. The partner's expression was cool, almost smug, which only confirmed Ethan's suspicions. He was likely at the heart of this sabotage. When their eyes met, the partner smiled thinly. "Getting ready for the big night?" Ethan stepped closer, keeping his voice low to avoid creating a scene in front of the staff. "You and I both know something's brewing that has nothing to do with dancing or champagne. How about we cut to the chase?" His partner feigned surprise. "Whatever do you mean?" Ethan's jaw tensed. "If you're trying to discredit me by framing someone I care about, it's not going to work. I can stop you. The question is, do you really want to ruin a billion-dollar deal just to sabotage me?" A flicker of annoyance crossed the partner's features, but he said nothing more, simply excusing himself to greet an investor who was passing by. Frustrated, Ethan watched him go, wishing he had solid proof in hand to confront him once and for all. But for now, all he could do was brace for impact and protect Jasmine. Evening descended, and the gala commenced. A live orchestra played gentle, sweeping music. Men in tuxedos and women in shimmering evening gowns floated through the enormous ballroom. Elegant chatter rose toward the vaulted ceiling, where lights cast glimmering patterns on polished floors. Waiters glided between tables with trays of sparkling drinks. Ethan stood at the room's edge, scanning the crowd for any sign of trouble. Finally, the moment arrived. A cluster of the most important investors gathered in front of the stage, the center of attention for a speech about the significance of this business alliance. Photographers hovered at the sidelines, ready to capture every glance and gesture. Ethan took a breath, preparing to step forward and address them. He had practiced what he would say if someone tried to bring up the rumors. But before he could utter a word, one of the investors, the tall man with gray sideburns, lifted a folder of papers high for all to see. "These documents," the man said loudly, voice cutting through the music, "paint a very different picture of Mr. Wood's dealings. Specifically, they suggest that your staff member, Jasmine, has been funneling information out of your company." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Glasses were lowered, whispered queries amplified by the hush that fell over the ballroom. Flashes from the cameras lit the stunned faces of onlookers. Ethan felt his heart pound, anger flaring at whoever had orchestrated this exact moment for maximum shock. His partner stood near the back, arms folded, a faint, knowing grin on his face. Across the room, Jasmine hovered by a tray of champagne flutes, the blood drained from her face. She clutched the tray so tightly Ethan feared she might drop it. Each guest seemed to look from the papers to her, a silent tide of accusation building in their eyes. Ethan stepped forward, his protests on the tip of his tongue. But the investor fixed him with a stern glare. "We demand an explanation." All around them, voices rose, pressing for details. The cameras focused on the folder, capturing every angle of the so-called evidence. Jasmine stood rooted to the spot, her expression one of shock and betrayal, as though the entire world had turned against her in a single moment. Just as Ethan is about to speak, the investor lifts the forged documents in front of the entire gala, demanding an explanation, and all eyes turn accusingly to Jasmine. For one frozen second, the ballroom seemed caught in a hush so deep it muffled the thrum of the ship's engines and the anxious drumming of Ethan's own pulse. The investor holding the incriminating folder peered over the top of those doctored documents, eyes full of iron. Flashes popped from cameras as onlookers crowded closer, their formal attire rustling in tense anticipation. Across the room, Jasmine stood stiff and silent, clutching a tray of champagne flutes as though it was the only thing keeping her upright. Ethan forced himself to breathe. He stepped forward, heart pounding, and addressed the stunned crowd. "These documents. They're fakes," he said, voice resonating through the microphone at the front of the stage. "Someone's taken data from my company and twisted it to look like Jasmine stole sensitive information." A ripple of unease spread through the guests. Several of the major investors exchanged wary glances, weighing whether they believed Ethan's words or the dramatic evidence laid before them. The man holding the folder squared his shoulders and shook the papers, the sound crackling like thunder in the otherwise hushed space. "Are you saying these are forgeries?" he pressed, eyes narrowing. "Because according to these files, your staff member here downloaded restricted corporate information while working under your nose." Jasmine inhaled sharply. She wanted to speak, but each time she opened her mouth, the room's tension closed in on her. Instead, she stood there feeling painfully exposed, the stares of hundreds of elegantly dressed strangers cutting her to the core. Ethan tried to maintain composure, though anger frothed inside him. "I am saying exactly that. This is a setup, an elaborate attempt to discredit me and drive a wedge between us and our investors. Anyone who knows Jasmine understands she has neither the access nor the motive to do this." A few cameras swiveled toward Jasmine. She set the tray down on a nearby table, her hands trembling. "I barely know how to log into my own staff account," she said with a fragile edge of desperation in her voice. "I've never even seen those documents." A hush lingered, broken only by scattered murmurs. Then another investor stepped forward, clearing his throat. "Mr. Wood, while I respect your position, can you provide actual proof these files aren't genuine? Because if they are real, we have a major security breach on our hands." Before Ethan could respond, the man who had orchestrated so much of this chaos stepped out from the shadows at the back of the ballroom. His partner, faultless in an expensive suit, gave a smooth, sympathetic smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Perhaps," the partner said, voice measured, "we should give Mr. Wood a chance to properly investigate. But given the seriousness of the allegations, it might be wise to remove any involved parties from the premises until the matter is resolved, so as not to damage the signing of our billion-dollar contract, of course." Ethan's blood ran hot. He recognized the cunning behind those polite words. By removing involved parties, his partner was pressuring him to publicly disavow Jasmine. The crowd, sensing a dramatic crossroads, edged closer. Whispers rippled, a swell of speculation about how Ethan would respond. Jasmine's heart pounded. Her gaze locked onto Ethan, searching for an anchor, a sign she wasn't about to be thrown to the wolves. She could almost hear the unspoken question in his partner's voice. Would Ethan choose to protect his business empire or stand by the woman everyone now labeled a traitor? After a beat that felt endless, Ethan raised the microphone again. "I have zero intention of removing her. Jasmine is innocent," he said firmly, each word resonating in the hush. "Anyone who suggests otherwise is buying into a deliberate lie." A low murmur moved through the crowd. Some guests nodded in hesitant support, but others frowned, uncertain. One investor pursed her lips and turned away, as if distancing herself from the brewing scandal. The partner's expression shifted, a flicker of annoyance showing, quickly hidden behind a mask of concern. "But Mr. Wood," the partner continued, "the rest of the board must agree that these allegations are a huge liability. With the contract at stake, we can't let emotions cloud our judgment. I suggest we ask Ms. Jasmine to step aside temporarily until these claims can be fully examined." A hush fell. All eyes turned to Ethan, silently urging him to see reason. If he didn't comply, if he insisted on defending Jasmine in front of everyone, he risked his entire business future. The partner pressed the advantage, leaning in with a tone that signaled concern for their mutual endeavor. "Think carefully," he urged. Ethan's grip on the microphone was so tight his knuckles ached. He wanted to shout that it was all a setup, that the man proposing caution was likely the architect of the entire sabotage. But no matter how hard he tried to gather the words, he saw a few influential investors glancing at their watches, steeling themselves to walk away from a precarious deal. He could almost hear the billions slipping through his fingers if he insisted on a stance that the majority perceived as reckless. Jasmine, meanwhile, felt tears pricking the corners of her eyes. She tried to swallow them back, but the sight of Ethan poised at the brink fighting for her nearly shattered her composure. If she weren't so terrified, she would have admired him for that unwavering loyalty. Instead, she stood with her heart hammering, waiting for the blow that would change her life forever. Finally, Ethan spoke. "I will not force her off this ship. She's done nothing wrong." His words rippled through the assembled crowd, sparking more murmurs. He set the microphone down on the stand with a gentle click. The formalities were over. He was making a choice. From the very edges of the room came a uniformed security officer, uncertain how to act. The officer looked to Ethan, then to the partner, and then to the main group of investors. A moment of awkward indecision passed. Nobody in that room seemed to know what came next. A few investors drew back, whispering among themselves. One stepped forward, brow furrowed in disapproval. "Mr. Wood," she said, "this is not the time or place for a standoff. Please understand that if these documents are true, you could be jeopardizing everything." "Let the record show," added another, scanning the crowd as though addressing a courtroom. "Some of us won't proceed with the contract under a cloud of corporate espionage." Ethan drew in a tight breath, glimpsing the crestfallen look on Jasmine's face as the accusations kept coming. "If that's your stance," he said, "then you can do whatever you must. But I stand by my belief that these files are false." Without warning, the partner took a half-step forward, voice booming enough to fill every corner of the ballroom. "Ladies and gentlemen, I suggest we postpone any final decisions. Let's allow Mr. Wood time to gather the necessary proof. In the meantime, perhaps Ms. Jasmine can quietly resign from her duties to avoid further disruption." The partner's words, disguised as a fair compromise, unleashed another wave of murmurs. Jasmine saw how many heads nodded at the suggestion, as if it were the most reasonable solution. Her chest constricted in panic. Resigning meant sacrificing not only her livelihood but the security of her children. Yet resisting seemed equally hopeless. Ethan's rage flared. He shoved the microphone aside, ignoring the startled gasps, and crossed the floor to Jasmine. Photographers snapped pictures, capturing the heartbreak etched into her features and the determined set of his jaw. He slipped an arm around her, defying the pressure to distance himself. "For now," he said to the crowd, voice trembling with anger, "we'll talk this through in private. It's clear this public spectacle isn't about justice, it's about destroying reputations." A flurry of voices rose in protest. Cameras flashed, capturing the tense interplay of power and betrayal. Investors tried to corner Ethan for an explanation, but he shielded Jasmine and guided her through the throng of onlookers. A path opened as people stepped back, unwilling to physically block them, but clearly unsettled by Ethan's open display of solidarity. Glancing over his shoulder, Ethan spotted the thin, satisfied smile on his partner's face. Though half the room was now abuzz with speculation, the partner looked eerily calm, as if everything had gone exactly as planned. Ethan grit his teeth, anger and protectiveness fueling each determined stride toward the exit. They burst out into a nearby corridor, away from prying eyes. Jasmine pressed a shaky hand to her forehead. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, voice thick with emotion. "I can't believe I'm costing you this deal." He turned to face her, placing both hands gently on her shoulders. "You didn't cause any of this," he said fiercely. "Don't let them convince you otherwise. This is all someone's twisted plot, and I will find a way to prove it." Somewhere behind them, they could still hear the faint buzz of the ballroom, music and chatter mixing uneasily with the sounds of confusion. Photographers' footsteps clicked across the marble, evidently searching for any new angle on the unfolding drama. Jasmine nodded, tears finally welling up and spilling onto her cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered, voice catching in her throat. "But what if—" She never finished. The corridor filled with echoes of footsteps and a sarcastic, mocking laugh. They looked back to see the partner standing near the doors, arms crossed over his chest, lips twisted into a triumphant sneer. "You've lost everything for her," he called out, voice dripping with contempt. "You'll regret this." Ethan and Jasmine found themselves in a narrow corridor just outside the ballroom, away from the prying eyes that had feasted on their public humiliation. A single overhead light flickered, casting unsteady shadows on the walls. Farther down the passage, muffled strains of music hinted that the gala was still limping on without them, though they both knew the real damage was done. They stood facing each other, both breathing unevenly. The loud accusations still echoed in their minds. Stolen documents, espionage, betrayal. Ethan tried to gather his thoughts, his eyes lingering on Jasmine's tear-streaked cheeks. The heartbreak he felt was different from any he'd experienced in business. It was raw, personal, and cut deeper than a lost negotiation. "I'm sorry," she whispered, choking back more tears. "I never wanted to drag you down." He shook his head, struggling to find the right words. "This isn't your fault," he said softly. "You didn't forge those files or spin that twisted story." She didn't seem convinced. Beneath the harsh overhead bulb, the circles under her eyes stood out. "Maybe not," she said, voice trembling, "but you're paying the price. I heard those investors talking. They're going to walk away from the contract. You could lose everything because of me." He closed the distance between them and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "That contract means thousands of employees counting on me. I know what's at stake, but I can't—" His words faltered. He exhaled sharply, pressing his lips together, then continued, "I can't sacrifice you to save it. I refuse to." In the silence that followed, both felt the weight of the impossible choice. Jasmine turned her gaze to the corridor floor, tears dripping onto the worn carpet. "I should just leave the cruise," she said in a shaky whisper. "I can pack my bag tonight and go. Maybe I can catch a boat from the next port. If I'm gone, then the rumors lose fuel and you can—" "No," Ethan cut in, frustration edging his voice. "Running won't solve anything. They'll spin it to look like an admission of guilt. We have to prove you're innocent." "Ethan," his name slipped from her lips in a near plea, "I can't stand the idea that your life's work is in jeopardy. You didn't ask for any of this." He hesitated, memories of the gala swirling through his mind, the stairs, the flash of cameras, and his business partner's smug expression. "If I have to start over," he said at length, "I will. I've done it before. But I'm not about to let them destroy you. That's final." Her tears flowed freely now. She stepped forward, resting her head momentarily against his shoulder, taking in the faint smell of cologne mixed with the sea air drifting through the corridor's vents. He wrapped an arm around her in quiet reassurance, feeling her trembling beneath his touch. Footsteps interrupted them. They looked up as Ethan's advisor approached, his usually composed face lined with urgency. "You two need to come with me," he said. "Now." Ethan's arm stayed protectively around Jasmine. "What is it?" "I found something that might help us," the advisor explained, lowering his voice. "But we have to move fast." They followed him deeper into the ship's staff area, ducking into a small administrative office that smelled of old carpeting and stale coffee. The door closed behind them with a click, and the advisor flipped on a desk lamp. It cast a warm, low light that revealed a rolling chair, a cluttered desk, and a bank of monitors showing security camera feeds from around the vessel. The advisor rifled through a folder on the desk until he found a small USB stick. He held it up like it was precious contraband. "I discovered that the ship's security cameras caught something, a moment that might prove Jasmine had nothing to do with the forged files." Jasmine's eyes widened. "Which moment?" "I'm still piecing it together," the advisor said. "But from what I can tell, it shows someone entering a secure area with a stolen keycard. We think it's the same person who modified your company's files. If that footage shows them tampering with the server, it's proof you were framed." Ethan set his jaw. "We need to see it, right away." "That's the issue," the advisor replied, glancing nervously at the door. "The footage is stored in a backup server in the security office. Some of it's already been wiped. Someone's trying to erase their tracks. We managed to save a copy, but it's incomplete. Jasmine's pulse quickened. Incomplete? The advisor nodded grimly. It might still be enough, though. If we can show it to the right people, they'll see that you weren't the one sneaking around. Ethan tilted his head, fear and hope warring inside him. Does my partner know about this footage? The advisor hesitated, then nodded. I'd guess yes. If he finds out we have it, he'll do whatever he can to destroy the copy. We're running out of time. Jasmine drew a shaky breath. So what do we do? We have to get to the security office and retrieve the original version, the advisor explained. This one here, he waved the USB, is from a general backup. The full version might show exactly who accessed the servers and planted the forged documents. Then we'll have indisputable proof you're innocent. Ethan clenched his hands into fists, already picturing the lengths his partner would go. Where is this security office? 2 decks below near the staff quarters, but I've heard the door was locked down after the fiasco at the gala. Only a handful of people have the access code. Jasmine thought back to the glances and whispers she'd endured from security personnel. So even if we show up, we might be turned away? That's what I'm worried about, the advisor admitted, but it's our only shot. Their planning was cut short by a sudden pounding on the door. The advisor's eyes darted in panic. Ethan quickly slipped the USB into his pocket. Jasmine tensed, heart hammering. The door creaked open, revealing a pair of uniformed staff. One was the cruise director, her face drawn and set. The other was the same supervisor who had been suspicious of Jasmine from day one. The director's gaze swept over the small group. I'm sorry to barge in, she said evenly, but I've been informed you're still investigating some dispute regarding corporate theft. I need to remind you that the owners of this cruise line value discretion above all. We've had enough commotion with that scene at the gala. Ethan met her eyes. We're close to figuring out who's behind the sabotage. If you let us work, we can resolve this before the ship docks. She pursed her lips, torn between her responsibilities to keep the ship's environment calm and her recognition that Ethan was one of the wealthiest VIPs aboard. I'm not sure how much more disruption the investors can handle. They're demanding immediate answers. Some are even threatening to disembark at the next port. Jasmine's heart sank, imagining the utter chaos if the investors left, sealing Ethan's financial ruin. We just need a little more time. The director leveled a pensive stare at her. Time is in short supply, she said at last. Then she shot a warning glance at the supervisor, who looked eager to haul Jasmine away. Mr. Wood, you and your associates have until tomorrow morning. If this matter isn't settled by then, I'll have no choice but to secure the comfort of our other passengers. Ethan knew exactly what she meant. She'd expel him and Jasmine from the ship if things didn't quiet down. He offered a tight nod. Understood. With that, the director and supervisor left, shutting the door behind them. Ethan drew in a steadying breath. Then the 3 conspirators, he, Jasmine, and the advisor, exchanged looks that confirmed the same singular thought. Tonight was their last shot at salvaging the truth. They decided to split up to avoid drawing too much attention. The advisor would attempt to gather any leads about the security office's new passcode, while Ethan and Jasmine would remain out of sight until the moment was right. Before they parted ways, the advisor squeezed Ethan's shoulder. Be careful, he said. Your partner's men could be anywhere. Ethan's expression was grim. Thanks for the reminder. He and Jasmine moved silently through corridors normally bustling with staff. Now, with the gala winding down, many had gone to bed, leaving only scattered souls drifting about. In one of the narrow stairwells they paused, listening intently. Hearing no footsteps, they continued. The hush that settled over the ship made every distant clang or muted conversation echo eerily. In that strange twilight of the ship's nightly lull, Jasmine spoke quietly, as if raising her voice might jinx any good fortune left. I'm so thankful you didn't give in, she said, recalling the partner's demand that she resign. You could have saved yourself. Ethan paused on a stair. The overhead lights buzzed faintly. "I can't walk away from doing what's right," he told her. "My conscience would haunt me." A gentle warmth spread through her chest, momentarily soothing her anxiety, yet guilt still gnawed at her. "Even if it means your employees might lose everything? That contract was so important?" He looked at her, sincerity filling his gaze. "We'll find another solution, no matter what. We just have to get that footage." They made their way to the upper deck, slipping out onto an open-air walkway. The night sky stretched overhead in a canopy of stars. For a fleeting moment, the ship's grandeur and the quiet ocean surroundings felt surreal, like stepping into a dream far removed from the tension coiled inside them. Then footsteps. They ducked behind a set of lounge chairs, holding their breath as a uniformed guard strolled by, scanning the shadows. Once he disappeared, they exhaled in relief. A faint ping sounded from Ethan's phone. He glanced at the screen. A text from the advisor. "Got code. Hurry. Stairwell D, Deck 3. Ethan showed Jasmine. "This is our chance." They moved quickly now, heartbeats thudding, adrenaline surging. When they reached Stairwell D, the advisor waited under a dim ceiling light, arms folded protectively over a small laptop. He led them down a long corridor, stopping at an unmarked metal door. A keypad glowed faintly beside it. The advisor tapped in numbers, glancing over his shoulder as if expecting guards to rush them at any second. The lock clicked open. They slipped inside, greeted by the hum of computer servers lining the walls and the faint glow of monitors. The room was cooler, air-conditioned to keep the electronics stable. Quietly, the advisor pressed a few keys on a central console. "This is it," he whispered, pointing to a screen that displayed a list of recordings. Ethan's eyes flicked over the timestamps. One file in particular stood out, flagged with a partial date matching the night the forged documents had been planted. Jasmine's heart pounded. "That's when they accessed the system, right?" "Looks like it," the advisor said. He inserted the USB from earlier, hitting a few more keys. A progress bar popped up on the screen, slowly transferring data. "If we can piece together the missing footage, we'll have the proof we need." Light footsteps scuffed in the hall behind them. Ethan tensed, turning off the monitor's brightness to avoid drawing attention. Then the footsteps moved on. Relief settled briefly, but they all knew they weren't safe yet. The progress bar crept along at an agonizing pace. Finally, a soft chime signaled the end of the download. The advisor snatched the USB free, and they slipped back into the corridor, hearts racing. The moment the door sealed shut behind them, the trio scattered. The advisor vanished one way, Ethan and Jasmine headed another. They reconvened in Ethan's suite an hour later, hearts still hammering with fear and hope. The suite's lights were dimmed. Outside, the night pressed in on all sides, the ship forging ahead through black waves. Ethan paced while the advisor plugged the USB into a laptop on the dining table. Jasmine hovered, arms folded anxiously. On the screen, a grainy security video showed a figure in a dark jacket entering a server room. The quality was poor, but it clearly wasn't Jasmine. Her heart leapt at the vindication. She glanced at Ethan, who gave a small nod of encouragement, but the video cut off abruptly, a glitch distorting the last few seconds into static. The advisor tried replaying it, with no luck. That final moment, the exact instant they needed to see the person's face, was gone. Exhaustion fell over them. Jasmine slumped into a chair, pressing her hands against her eyes. "So we can't identify who it is?" Ethan leaned over the back of her chair, staring at the screen. "It's a start. At least it proves it wasn't you. But without that last frame, we're missing the smoking gun." Jasmine sighed, voice shaky. "Is there any way to fix this?" Ethan set his jaw. "We'll have to make this enough." A restless dawn found Ethan hunched over a small table in his suite, scanning the partial security footage on his laptop for what felt like the 1,000th time. The images showed a shadowy figure skulking into the server room, tampering with the system. but abruptly cutting off before the intruder's face came into frame. Jasmine stood nearby, arms folded, biting her lower lip as the loop repeated. "It's not enough," she said quietly, voice tight with frustration. "They'll say it could be anyone." Ethan dragged a hand through his hair. "We still have a chance," he replied. "It proves you weren't the one in there." She let out a weary sigh. "But we can't identify who actually did it." Before Ethan could respond, there was a quick knock on the door. His advisor slipped inside, shutting it firmly. "I've got updates, but you two need to brace yourselves," he said, tone urgent. Ethan tensed. "What is it?" "The remaining investors are meeting in the main conference hall in an hour," the advisor explained. "They're deciding whether to move forward with the contract or walk away. Your partner is going to be there, spinning the story to his advantage. Word is he hired extra security to keep certain individuals from entering." Jasmine swallowed. "So he means to block me from defending myself." The advisor nodded grimly. "Likely. But Ethan needs you there. Without your presence, it's just his word that you're innocent. And after that disaster at the gala, your partner has a stronger grip on the narrative." Ethan shut the laptop with more force than he intended. "Then I'll take that gamble. We'll confront them all at once. If my partner wants a spectacle, we'll give him one. But on our terms." Jasmine's eyes flicked between the two men. "How?" "The second we step into that conference hall, they'll probably have guards waiting to escort me out." "I have a plan," the advisor said, though anxiety threaded his voice. "Not a perfect one, but if we time it right, we might catch the board off guard. Here's the idea." They leaned in as he laid out a strategy. Ethan would enter first, present a calm front, and demand a private hearing from the board members about the sabotage allegations. Meanwhile, Jasmine would stay just outside with the advisor until a cue to enter, bringing along the incriminating footage. If things went sideways, the advisor would cause a distraction, giving her a chance to slip in and speak her piece. It was risky, but they all agreed it was the best shot. The clock was ticking. With a nod of grim determination, they set off. The corridor outside Ethan's suite was eerily still, as if the ship itself were holding its breath. They made their way toward the conference hall, which was tucked away near the upper decks reserved for VIP meetings. Along the way, they spotted uniformed security stationed at intervals, just as the advisor had warned. Their presence telegraphed that something high stakes was about to unfold. Ethan paused at a corner and turned to Jasmine. "Stay back until you hear the signal," he reminded her softly. "I need to get inside first." She nodded, her heart pounding. "Be careful." He offered a reassuring smile, then stepped forward, shoulders squared. The advisor gave Jasmine an encouraging pat on the arm before following Ethan, leaving her crouched behind a potted plant that offered meager cover. From her hidden vantage, she could see 2 guards in front of the conference room doors. Moments later, Ethan approached the guards with an air of authority. They looked uneasy. One seemed to hesitate, but with a curt nod he stepped aside and let Ethan pass. The door swung open and Ethan disappeared into the room, leaving Jasmine to wonder what was happening beyond that threshold. Inside, the space was well lit, featuring a long rectangular table at the center. Around it, the remaining investors sat with papers, laptops, and faces etched in concern or skepticism. At the far side, leaning casually against a chair, was Ethan's partner, exuding his usual polished confidence. "All right," Ethan said, voice firm. "Let's address the elephant in the room. You have concerns about my competence and the alleged espionage that's been pinned on Jasmine." One of the senior investors, an older woman with silver-rimmed glasses, cleared her throat. "Yes, the claims against this employee are serious. If you can't provide solid proof she's innocent, we can't risk proceeding with the contract." Ethan locked eyes with his partner across the table. "We have partial security footage that shows someone else tampering with the files. Whoever it is, it's not Jasmine. She was set up." His partner gave a practiced, sympathetic smile. "We'd love to see that evidence, of course, but we also must ensure this is no trick. After the fiasco at the gala, your credibility is—" shaky. Murmurs fluttered around the table. Ethan drew a measured breath, reminding himself of the plan. "I'll bring in the proof. On one condition. Let Jasmine speak. She's been wrongly silenced throughout this entire ordeal." Before anyone could respond, the conference room door inched open. The same guards who'd let Ethan in now stepped forward, clearly receiving instructions through their earpieces. "Mr. Wood, we have orders not to let that staff member inside," one guard said, refusing to meet Ethan's gaze. Ethan's eyes hardened. He turned to the investors, voice rising with quiet fury. "Are you truly going to lock out the one person who has the most at stake here? How can you call this fair?" Some of the investors looked uncomfortable. Ethan's partner lifted his hands in a gesture of false helplessness. "We're only respecting the wishes of the majority, Ethan. We can't allow a potential corporate spy to waltz in and tamper with vital negotiations." Back in the hallway, Jasmine's heart hammered as she watched from her hiding spot. The advisor waited tensely at her side, scanning the corridor. She couldn't hear every word, but the guard's posture told her they were turning her away. "Now," the advisor whispered, tapping her elbow. "We'll create a stir, and you slip in." He strode out into plain view, waving a phone in the air. "Gentlemen, I have new information about those forged documents," he announced loudly, quickly catching the guards' attention. In the moment they turned to address the advisor, Jasmine slid around the corner and darted into the conference room. The guards noticed a heartbeat too late. One tried to grab her arm, but she twisted free and rushed toward the table. A wave of shocked exclamations broke out among the investors. Some rose from their chairs, faces taut with alarm or indignation. Ethan, chest tightening with relief and concern, moved to stand beside Jasmine. "Is this how you handle negotiations?" Jasmine asked, voice shaking but resolute. "By shutting out the person who's being framed? All I want is a chance to prove my innocence." Ethan's partner leveled a disdainful stare at her. "Very dramatic, but you've given us no reason to trust you." Jasmine held up a flash drive. "This contains the security footage that shows I wasn't the one in that server room, and another file that proves it was physically impossible for me to have done what these forged documents claim." She placed the drive on the table. The senior investor with the silver-rimmed glasses exhaled, clearly torn. "Let's see it." They moved to a screen at the head of the room. The advisor, having shaken off the guards, joined them and quickly navigated the files. The grainy footage filled the screen, showing that dark figure slipping into the server room, matching timestamps with the stolen data. Whispers spread through the group as they realized the silhouette bore no resemblance to Jasmine. "It's incomplete," Ethan admitted, "but it's enough to confirm she isn't the culprit." With an almost lazy calm, the partner arched an eyebrow. "So there's no definitive face. What if that's Jasmine in disguise?" A wave of frustration crossed Ethan's features. "That's ludicrous. You can see the build is entirely different, and these logs show her working elsewhere at the exact same time." He pointed to another file that cross-referenced Jasmine's staff card usage in another section of the ship. Though the evidence was largely circumstantial, it painted a clear picture. Jasmine wasn't anywhere near the compromised server. A hush settled as the senior investor studied the data. At length, she pursed her lips. "This calls into question everything that's been alleged against Ms. Jasmine. And if there's foul play, we need to ask, who benefits from framing her in the first place?" The partner attempted a disarming laugh. "Let's not jump to conspiracies." Ethan rounded on him, finally voicing what had been brewing for days. "We know you've been feeding the board half-truths, possibly more. You orchestrated that spectacle at the gala, and you tried to lock out the one person who could shine a light on your lies." Investors looked between them, confusion and indignation mounting in the air. The partner's confident veneer cracked. "I've done no such thing," he snapped. "It's your word against mine." One of the younger investors stepped forward, face stern. "If Ms. Jasmine didn't orchestrate this theft, then someone else did. and the timing is awfully convenient for anyone trying to undermine Ethan's position. Perhaps to gain more control over the contract? The partner's lips thinned. He straightened his suit jacket, glancing toward the door as if contemplating a quick exit. But the guard outside had reappeared, now looking uncertain about whom to stand behind. Tension rippled through the room. It was evident that the tide was turning against the partner. Caught in the shift, he grabbed his briefcase and made a move for the exit. "This is a farce," he muttered. "I'll see to it that real investigators handle this from now on." "Not so fast," the senior investor said sharply. She stepped into his path, expression stony. "We have a lot of questions, starting with your role in this sabotage. Perhaps you'd like to explain why you had special security roam the ship at odd hours, or why you insisted Ms. Jasmine be excluded from any meeting." A murmur of agreement rose around her. Cameras, originally stationed outside the conference room, caught wind of the commotion and began flashing at the threshold. The partner's composure wavered as he realized he was pinned in a ring of furious investors. Before he could escape, an authoritative voice from the leading investor group declared, "You have a lot to answer for." Ethan and Jasmine locked eyes. Victory was within reach, if only they could finalize the deal. The morning sun streamed through the grand windows of the cruise liner's main conference hall, illuminating the row of investors seated at the long table. Tension still hung thick in the air. The partner, now thoroughly unmasked as the orchestrator of sabotage, stood in a corner, flanked by a pair of security officers. His smug composure had vanished, replaced by a tight grimace. Ethan stood at the head of the table, shoulders squared. Beside him was Jasmine, posture upright yet visibly relieved. Though her cheeks were still flushed from the night's ordeals, a quiet strength shone in her eyes. A hush fell as the leading investor, a stern-faced woman with silver hair, flipped through the final pages of the freshly revised contract. "We've all reviewed the evidence," she began, laying her pen on the table. "It's clear that Ms. Jasmine was framed by your associate here." She cast a scathing glance at the partner. "He manipulated security records and leveraged rumors to undermine our confidence in this deal, and in doing so, he nearly derailed a negotiation worth billions." The partner shifted uncomfortably, but he stayed silent, his pride clearly wounded. The security officers looked ready to escort him out at the slightest provocation. An undercurrent of shock rippled through the other investors. Though many had suspected foul play, seeing it confirmed left them reeling. Ethan cleared his throat, a mixture of relief and resolve moving through him. "I sincerely apologize to everyone for the chaos. I had no idea my associate would take such extreme measures. But I stand by my decision to protect Jasmine. She's innocent." Jasmine felt her cheeks warm. She couldn't have imagined just days ago standing in a room of power brokers while a billionaire publicly defended her. The memory of that terrifying moment at the gala flickered through her mind. The cameras, the accusations, the humiliating stares. Now, though, the truth had finally come to light. The senior investor nodded. "Your loyalty speaks well of you, Mr. Wood. Many of us initially doubted your judgment, but it's clear your moral compass is intact. That said, we must reevaluate the terms of the contract before we commit. Your former partner's shares and influence in this deal are no longer acceptable." A murmur of agreement ran through the board members. Ethan's partner visibly paled. "You can't just cut me out," he hissed. "This entire enterprise was built on my investments too." Another investor, a tall man in a navy suit, frowned in disapproval. "You nearly cost us the entire project. Be thankful if you walk away without legal repercussions. Your shares are forfeit." Ethan glanced at Jasmine, then back at the table. "I'm prepared to restructure the agreement. I've already had my legal team draw up alternate clauses that exclude any involvement from him." He gestured toward the partner. "He'll no longer have a seat in this venture." The partner opened his mouth as if to argue, but the withering stare from the security officers kept him silent. After a tense beat, he turned and slunk out under their watchful escort, leaving behind only the sting of betrayal and the faint echo of his expensive shoes on the polished floor. With that, the senior investor slid the revised contract across the table. "Let's finalize this then. We want your company's strength behind our joint venture, assuming we've eradicated all traces of sabotage." Ethan exhaled, a wave of relief coursing through him. He offered Jasmine a faint smile, then took a pen from his breast pocket. In the hush of the moment, he signed his name, each stroke of ink signaling a fresh start. The tall man in the navy suit followed suit, then passed it to another investor. Pens scratched in turn, sealing the fate of a billion-dollar alliance. When the last signature was placed, quiet applause broke out among the gathered investors. A few approached Ethan to shake his hand, their eyes reflecting a newfound respect. They spared polite nods for Jasmine, too, who felt a flicker of overwhelming gratitude and disbelief. A short while later, a formal press statement was drafted. The sabotage scandal would be attributed to a rogue operator, Ethan's ex-partner, and public confidence would be reassured by the swift actions taken to remove him. Some of the investors even made a point of praising Ethan's integrity in the face of corporate treachery. Shortly afterward, the crowd began to disperse, many eager to pack up before the cruise's final port. As the last investor left the conference hall, Jasmine found herself alone with Ethan in the quiet, sunlit space. Outside the tall windows, the ocean glittered. She turned to him, emotion brimming in her eyes. "You did it," she said, voice trembling with relief. "You saved the deal, and you saved me." He reached out, gently brushing a stray lock of hair away from her face. "We did it," he corrected, voice filled with warmth. "Your courage and honesty won them over as much as any legal maneuver." She let out a soft laugh, the tension that had knotted in her chest finally unraveling. "I can't believe this is real." A polite cough sounded from behind them. They turned to see one of the senior investors standing by the door carrying a slim manila folder. "I'm sorry to interrupt," he said with a gracious smile. "I just wanted to say that your story, both of you, moved us. Ms. Jasmine, we see you as someone who's persevered under incredible hardship." Jasmine blinked, surprised to be addressed so formally by such a powerful figure. "Thank you," she managed, heart fluttering. He stepped forward, tapping the folder in his hand. "Some of us have decided to show our support. If you ever want to pursue further education or a specialized course, anything that might help you advance your career, let us know. We'd be happy to sponsor that." Her mouth fell open. "That's incredibly kind," she stammered, fighting off a wave of fresh tears. I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Ethan chimed in gently, a proud note in his voice. The investor gave them a farewell nod and left, leaving Jasmine in stunned silence. Overcome, she turned to Ethan, who gazed back with open admiration. "You deserve every opportunity," he said softly, taking her hands in his. "You have more drive and heart than anyone I've met." Her eyes glistened with gratitude, and she squeezed his hands in return. In that moment, something between them felt so certain, so true, she could scarcely contain the joy welling up inside her. Later that day, the cruise began its final approach toward the port where many would disembark. The once tense hallways were now alive with staff politely congratulating Jasmine, whispers of "she's the one who proved them wrong" trailing in her wake. Some apologized for doubting her, others simply offered encouraging smiles, a stark contrast to the suspicion she'd faced before. Ethan spent a few last hours tying up loose ends, finalizing the new contract details, ensuring word was out that his ex-partner no longer represented the company. By the late afternoon, the sky outside glowed a gentle orange, the sun dipping low over the calm sea. A small celebration took shape in one of the top-deck lounges, where staff who had seen the truth unravel gathered for a low-key toast. Jasmine's friend, the kind co-worker who'd stood by her side, raised a plastic glass of fruit punch, eyes shining with pride. Ethan watched from the edge of the group, heart full as he witnessed how well-loved Jasmine was despite everything that had transpired. Eventually, the ship's horn sounded, signaling their imminent docking. People began to head toward their cabins to gather luggage, while others lingered for final photographs. The overhead speakers announced the usual instructions for disembarkation. Jasmine felt a swell of bittersweet emotion as she walked beside Ethan, following the stream of departing passengers. She'd arrived on this cruise as an overworked staff member, desperate to secure income for her 3 children. She was leaving with her name cleared, her heart unexpectedly entangled with the very man she'd feared might send her packing. They stepped onto the gangway, the city's skyline rising in the distance. Port officials bustled around them, guiding guests to passport checks. Ethan and Jasmine paused near the end of the walkway, turning back for one final glance at the towering vessel that had been both a battleground and the place where they'd discovered something meaningful, something worth fighting for. Ethan took her hand, and she laced her fingers through his. The air around them felt charged with possibility. The stares of curious onlookers no longer bothered her. He smiled, eyes warm, and in that small expression she read a shared sense of triumph and relief. He leaned in close enough that she could feel his breath, voice low with genuine excitement. "Let's go meet your children," he whispered. Jasmine felt the words spark an electric thrill of hope. Tears of joy brimmed at the corners of her eyes as she squeezed his hand in return. Around them, the world bustled with its usual chaos, but in that moment, it seemed to hush. She gave a small, teary laugh, looking into his face. "I'd like that," she murmured. Then, with a final glance at the ship that had been their stage, they stepped forward together, confident that their story was only just beginning. If you enjoyed this story, don't miss the next one. Just click on the screen.